Welcome to the overview of Access for ELLs 2.0 Test Administrator Training for the 2021 administration. Thank you for joining us.
I'm Stacy Gillish, the Assessment and Compliance Facilitator.
And I'm Megan Brown, the EL Data Specialist.
Please take a moment to read through these objectives.
We will begin with key features. The Access for ELLs 2.0 assessments are a tool to measure English language learners' proficiency in English. The Access for ELLs 2.0 suite of assessments include Access for ELLs 2.0, Kindergarten Access for ELLs, Alternate Access for ELLs. Test participation is determined by grade level and considerations for special needs. The Access test is adaptive, meaning students progress through the test based on their performance in previous folders. Test items are grouped in folders around a common theme and domain. Based on their performance in an individual folder, the test engine determines the appropriate next folder for individual students. Listening and reading must be administered first, as a student's performance in these determines placement in speaking and writing. When students respond to the listening and reading items, which are multiple choice, DRC's online test engine will automatically score their answers. For the speaking test, the online test engine will record student responses. The students are using external headsets. The responses will be automatically sent to DRC for scoring by trained raters. When taking the writing test, students in grades 1 through 3 will view and respond using a paper test booklet. Students in grades 4 through 12 will view the prompts on their computer and keyboard their responses, which will be sent automatically to DRC for scoring. Students who handwrite using a paper test booklet must still be placed into a writing test session in WIDA AMS. More information about WIDA AMS is given later in this presentation. The kindergarten test form is individually administered and adaptive. Reading and writing items allow students to demonstrate pre-literacy skills that many kindergartners are still in the process of acquiring. All components are scored by the test administrator during administration. There is a separate presentation on the WIDA website which explains in much more detail how to administer and score the kindergarten assessment. Alternate Access for ELs is a separate assessment for students grades 1 through 12 with significant cognitive disabilities. Information about participation criteria and test administration of the alternate access tests can be found on the WIDA website under the Assessment tab. The Access test is aligned with the WIDA English Language Development Standards and assesses the 4 language domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The test is broken down into the 6 clusters listed here. Grade levels can be mixed for each domain for test administration, except for writing, grades 1 through 3, and speaking, pre-A. Domains cannot be mixed. Remember that the order of administration on the online test is tied to the staged adaptive nature of the test. Students' performance on the listening then reading tests will determine their placement for speaking and writing. Students will first take the listening test and then the reading test. They may be administered individually or consecutively. Next, students will take writing and speaking. They may also be administered individually or consecutively, and not in mixed domains. After the student completes listening and reading, they will be placed into a speaking tier and a writing tier. The speaking tiers are pre-A, A, or BC, and the writing tiers are A or BC. Site test coordinators must run a tier placement report in WIDA AMS to identify the appropriate tier level for students in grades 1 through 3 for the writing domain that is administered via paper pencil. It is suggested that you run one for grades 4 through 12 to better understand the test students will be taking, as timing may differ. The speaking tier for grades 1 through 12 will automatically be detected for a student once they complete both listening and reading and start the speaking domain. These are the estimated times it would take to complete each domain from the time a student logs in to the time the student completes the domain. While these are suggested guidelines for timing for each test, the Access test is not a timed test. Test administrators have professional discretion to allow necessary time for each student who is working productively to complete each domain. Testing accommodations must be identified in a student's IEP for use on the Access test. Additional information on available testing accommodations can be found in WIDA's Accessibility and Accommodations Supplement document. It is worth noting that WIDA may have some accommodations that are permissible. However, the state of Nevada may not allow those accommodations. There are 3 embedded test accommodations that must be pre-selected for students in WIDA AMS prior to testing or printing of test tickets. Those are manual control of item audio, repeat item audio, and extended speaking response time. You will need to notify me by completing the WIDA accommodation selection document for each student who requires any of these 3 embedded accommodations. This must be done prior to testing. Only our department can mark those accommodations in WIDA AMS. The form will be provided to you. Here we have some information worth noting for reading and listening. Please take a moment and read through them. And here are some tips we'd like to share with you for speaking and writing. Please take another moment and read through these. Site test coordinators will need to inventory the materials once they arrive at their sites. Use the packing list and the security checklist to inventory the test materials. Use these forms to document the test materials that you received. Make a note of any discrepancies. Any materials that you do not note as missing will be discovered by DRC when you return the materials, and you will be held accountable. If you need additional materials, you will need to email me. Additional materials that you do obtain from me during the test window must be included in your material return boxes. Materials shipped to your school must stay at your school. When a student transfers, they will use the new school's testing materials. Verify the accuracy of student pre-ID labels before affixing them to test booklets. If they are inaccurate or not included, hand bubble the student booklet and affix the district school label. Additional materials are available to print online from the WIDA website. Please read through the list below. The additional material ordering window is December 16th through February 19th. Also, please remember to keep your boxes for shipping your materials back. If a student in grades kindergarten 1 through 3 or a student who is an alternate access tester does not have a pre-ID label, you must put a district school label on the student's test booklet and hand bubble the demographics listed below onto the booklet. This can be found on pages 10 through 12 of the Test Administrator's Manual. It is very important that your bubbling be precise because it is used for validation and accountability purposes. Inaccuracies could delay student scores, result in no score for a student, or cause a student not to receive a test result report. So please be sure and be very careful and double check bubbling on student test booklets.
All secure test materials must be shipped back to DRC by March 5th, 2021. Any delay will result in a delay in reporting for the entire school district.
Next, we will discuss technology and troubleshooting for the online access assessment. Technology preparation at each of your school sites consists of two main components, the COS software and the Insight Secure browser. COS, or Central Office Services software, has been installed on an identified computer at each of your school sites. The COS software allows for hosting of DRC test content and helps to reduce internet bandwidth requirements. The COS also transports student responses back to DRC servers. The Insight Secure browser is what students will use to access the assessment. These browsers must be installed on student devices in order for them to test. The Access Assessment includes highly media-driven content, where on average each question is 2 to 3 megabytes. With that being said, we'd like you to keep in mind a couple technology considerations to ensure a better testing experience with less interruptions for students. I'd like to highlight that the Insight Secure browser requires an internet connection, so we do ask that your schools limit or halt the use of any additional streaming services during scheduled testing. Always keep your test sessions smaller if you're testing on a wireless connection or if in the past you have experienced test interruptions. In addition, when administering the speaking domain, please do not have more than 3 to 5 students testing in a single session. The Access Assessment requires use of district desktops or laptops, in addition to headphones with a microphone. There are additional devices that are permissible on the Access Assessment, but they may not be supported by our IT department. If you plan on using any of those, you may need to configure them on your own. Headphones without mics can be used for reading, listening, and writing. The writing online for grades 4th through 12th grade only require the headphones for instructions and the practice items that come at the start of the test. The headsets with microphones are required for the speaking domain. The Department of English Language Development will provide you with a troubleshooting document that is specific to the technology issues encountered within our district. In addition, WIDA and DRC have compiled a troubleshooting document that you can access from the WIDA Secure portal. Both documents will provide tips on how to troubleshoot the majority of encountered issues that can happen during testing. If you still need assistance after consulting any of the technology troubleshooting documents, we do ask that you make note of the following issues prior to calling, as these will help us better assist you in a timely manner. These notes will also better assist any calls that our department needs to make with DRC for specific help desk items. During the troubleshooting process, a system readiness check may need to be performed on a student device encountering technology issues. A system readiness check is accessed through the Insight Secure browser and requires an access code. This code is secure and should not be shared with students. The code is 7745. After the diagnostic runs, please note any red exclamation points, as those may be errors we need to fix. If your computer reports back all green check marks, it is telling us there is no issue with the device itself.
This slide shows the 3 roles for access testing and the responsibilities. It is vital that the site test coordinator understands these roles and ensures that they are followed to prevent any irregularities in test security. Please read this slide carefully and mark it for your reference later. If an additional site test coordinator is needed, this can be requested by contacting Stacy Gillish at the Department of ELD. Only the site test coordinator will have access to WIDA AMS and is the only person who can run reports and test tickets. Test coordinators will print and provide test tickets to test administrators. Each domain requires a separate test ticket. In order to test, each student will need a unique test ticket that contains student-specific credentials he or she must use to log in and begin testing. These tickets are secure materials and must be treated as such. Please check test tickets for students who have accommodations to verify they are listed on their tickets prior to testing. Tickets should be collected from students upon completion of a session. You will receive your Access test list on Monday, January 4th, 2021. You must use it as your working list for tracking student test progress and other pertinent information. You will send a copy of this list at the conclusion of testing to Stacy Gillish. Testing EL distance learners. Site test coordinators are responsible for contacting the parents or guardians of all distance learning EL students to request that the student participate in the administration of the Access following your annually submitted school test security plan. There is no refusal or opt-out for the Access. However, if parents decline to schedule testing for their child, we must document it. Here is an example of the document you must complete for distance learning students whom you call to schedule for testing. 100% participation is a federal and state requirement. Extenuating circumstances do occur and must be documented as to why a student is not tested. Here is an example of the test history list. You would need to fill this out for each student whom you make an attempt to test. Be thorough and document multiple attempts, as the goal is to test everyone. Now let's review some of the resources to assist with administration of the Access for ELLs 2.0. You will need to be familiar with the 2 manuals for WIDA Access for ELLs 2.0. The District and School Test Coordinator Manual, or TCM for test coordinators, explains all coordination responsibilities and tasks related to the implementation of all the assessments in the Access for ELLs 2.0 suite. The Test Administrator Manual, or TAM, includes Kinder, Alt Access, and online administrations. It focuses on all tasks and responsibilities test administrators oversee immediately before, during, and immediately after testing for all assessments in the Access for ELLs 2.0 suite of assessments. The Accessibility and Accommodation Supplement was developed to support test administrators' awareness and selection of test administrative considerations, universal tools, and accommodations for individual ELs in order to produce valid assessment results. The supplement is intended for district and school level personnel as well as decision-making teams, including IEP teams and 504 plan teams, as they prepare for and implement Access for ELs 2.0. The information provided in the supplement applies to all ELs who take Access for ELs 2.0 online, Kindergarten Access for ELs, and Alternate Access for ELs. The accessibility features and accommodations specified and described in the supplement are recommendations only and do not replace or amend state policies. In order to become certified to coordinate or administer any component of Access for ELs 2.0, you must complete specific training requirements within the Access training course. Go to weta.wisc.edu and log in to My Account and Secure Portal using your WETA username and password. Then click on the tile for the assessment you will administer: kindergarten, alternate, or online access. After you log on, you will be granted access to the My Account and Secure Portal. Records of individual certification quiz progress are available within the WETA Secure Portal, and individuals can print a certificate of their completed trainings. All individual certifications as far back as 2015-16 will remain available in the WETA Secure Portal, as the tests have not changed, although the format of the training has been updated. Within the Access for ELs 2.0 training course, information and new web-based training modules for each assessment can be accessed. For test administrators who were certified to administer the Access for ELs 2.0 suite of assessments as far back as 2015-16, recertification will not be necessary. Even if you are not required to recertify this year, it is recommended that all test administrators review the training materials to prepare for the upcoming administration. We will review specific training information on the next slide. Please send the WETA non-disclosure and user agreement forms upon completion to me. Test coordinators are responsible for ensuring that all test administrators have completed applicable training components before any access tests. Please make sure your information within the My Account information is correct. Most important, please make sure your email address, district, and school are correct. If not, please update and save. Training modules are accessible after logging in to the WETA website, entering My Account and Secure Portal, and selecting the applicable training course component. Each training module will appear with a brief description of its contents. New site test coordinators and test administrators need to view training tutorials that are pertinent to their role. The training tutorials are short presentations designed to teach you about a specific aspect of training. You would complete the knowledge checks at the end of each training tutorial. These activities will help prepare you to review key concepts in preparation for testing activities. You would also need to take appropriate quizzes depending on your role. You would need to take Kindergarten Access for ELs if you will be administering that test, grades 1 through 12 online if you are administering the online access, and the alternate access for ELs if you would be administering that test. Each assessment in the Access suite of assessments has a general administration quiz, which educators must pass with a score of 80% or higher in order to become certified to administer the assessment. WETA recommends taking the quiz immediately after completing the training. There is no limit to the number of quiz attempts. Once you have passed the administration quiz, your training certificate within the WETA Secure Portal will be updated to reflect your status as a certified test administrator for that component of the assessment suite. Preparing students to test is an important part of the process. The WETA website has resources available to assist you in preparing students for the Access test. WETA and its project partners have created Access for ELs 2.0 sample items to show educators, students, parents, guardians, and the general public the test content and language demands that may be found on the actual Access for ELs 2.0 test. It is advised that you introduce the test to your students about 2 weeks ahead of testing day. In order to access the interactive test practice, sample items, and test demos, you would go through the WETA site. Follow the steps you see below. navigate to the WCSD website, click on the Access heading, and select Preparing for Access Testing. Scroll halfway down the page until you locate number 4. Click on Test Practice and Sample Items page. You will find links that direct you to Test Demo, Sample Items, and Test Practice.
This year's testing window is January 19th through February 26th. Kindergarten may begin testing January 4th and go through February 26th. Please note the test times on this table. These are approximations, but give you a good place to start when planning the schedules. Remember that 3 to 5 students can be assessed on the speaking domain in a single test session. Also, students should view the test demo prior to taking the access, as it shows how to navigate through the test and use embedded accessibility tools. Students should also experience the test practice before the assessment, as they are designed to allow students to experience taking the assessment on the testing platform. Some important things to remember. No proctors or computer techs may administer the assessment. Secretaries and other unlicensed personnel cannot make rosters or test tickets. These items are secure and must be obtained from your site test coordinator. Student makeups may not have mixed domains. Please follow the scripts precisely and in its entirety for all domains. Scripts are divided by grade level clusters and will arrive with your material order on December 16th.
Our goal each year is to minimize the number of testing irregularities from the year before. On the next 2 slides is a list of the most common irregularities. Please take a few moments to read through these irregularities and pay close attention to the ways you can avoid them. In addition to the irregularities noted here, it's important to note that the primer states on page 22, bullet 17, a mobile phone for staff is allowed in the testing room if it is the only means of contacting school administration regarding testing issues. The staff mobile phone may be used only to call out or receive calls pertaining to the scheduled test session. Text messaging, email, or access to any other applications are prohibited.
The remainder of the training will be around kindergarten access for ELLs. If you are a secondary teacher, you have completed your training. Thank you for joining us. Let's review the test structure for kindergarten access for ELLs. The test administrator reads the narrative storybook and then administers listening and speaking together, followed by the writing experience and then the reading test. The test administrator will then administer the following sections using the expository activity board and cards. Listening and speaking test together again, and then writing experience, the starting point of which is based on the writing experience score from Part B, and then the reading test. This test starting point is based on the reading score from Part C. When you are preparing for test administration, you will want to familiarize yourself with the test administrator script for each portion of the kindergarten test before administering the test. It is recommended to practice with a colleague before you administer to a student. Testing should occur in a quiet room conducive to testing, and you should place yourself at a right angle to the student rather than across from them or next to them. This slide and the one that follows gives you a list of all of the kindergarten testing materials and what they contain. Please take a moment to read through both of these slides. All of these materials will be shipped to your school. Some general test administration procedures. Follow the script exactly. Read aloud everything in black bold and blue bold print. Student responses must be recorded and scored immediately after each level is completed. You must administer and score all items in any one level of a part before making a determination about whether to continue to the next level or to stop at that part. Kindergartners may need a break during the test administration. Stretch breaks may be taken between each section of the test. The test may be administered in 2 sessions with a break of no more than 2 school days between Part C, the narrative, and D, the expository. Let's take a closer look at Parts A through C, the narrative administration information. Take a look at this graphic. It shows each part of the test as well as each level. You'll move through the levels of each part until a student reaches his or her ceiling. Parts E, writing, and F, reading. The starting point of these two will be determined by the performance on their prior writing and reading tasks. Listening item prompts the students to point to something in a picture or point to and/or move a card. Do not read a listening item more than 1 time, and you will score a listening item correct or incorrect. Here are some important scoring rules. The test administrator must score the item immediately after the student responds to the last question in the task. If you're unsure whether to score a response meets or approaches, the question mark box can be marked. Then administer the next task. If the response to the next task scores meets, go back and rate the previous task, the one you marked with a question mark, as meets. If the response to the next task approaches, go back and rate the previous task approaches. You'll want to note the last task on a part may not be scored with a question mark. The rating represents the student's performance on the complete task, not on individual questions within the task. Here's an image of the speaking rubric for kindergarten. You will want to obtain this document and read through it carefully before scoring the speaking. When marking answers in Part A, you will need to fill in the correct or incorrect bubble for each level. You will need to fill in meets, approaches, or question mark. And then you will need to determine if you are moving on in Part A or if you go to Part B. Finally, you would mark whether or not you stopped here if this is the last level administered.
Part C is reading. There are 5 levels of tasks on the reading test. Tasks include matching cards, categorizing pictures, and pointing to pictures. Some of the initial tasks assess pre-literacy skills. Reading items are scored correct or incorrect. Based on how many tasks the student correctly completed, score the student's performance as high, mid, or low, and record in Part F in the student response booklet. This will determine the starting point in the next part of the reading test. When recording your answers for Part C, you will fill in correct or incorrect for each question. You will determine if you will move on to the next level within Part C or go to Part D. And if this is the last level to be administered, you would mark stopped here. It's important to note in C1 and F1, there is no stop if criteria. Test administrators always move on to C2 and F2 regardless of student score. Parts D through F, expository administration directions. Part D is listening and speaking. It is like Part A, listening and speaking. It is based on an activity board. You will open and close panels as directed. Follow the script exactly. Begin at level D1 and administer Part D until the student reaches his or her ceiling. Scoring rules for Part D are the same as for Part A. Part E writing is a leveled writing task. The entrance point is based on the student's performance on Part B. You will mark where you begin under the Started Here column in Part E. If high, start with E45, the writing experience. If mid, start with E3, beginning and ending sounds. And if low, start with E1, tracing and copying. Please note that you do not go back to a previous level in Part E if the child cannot successfully complete the level on which you have started him or her. Part E scoring guidance, E1 through E3 leveled tasks. Scored as correct or incorrect. E4 and 5 writing experience task, rated using the pre-K through K writing rubric. The test administrator assigns the writing a score of 1 through 6 using the writing rubric after the student completes the entire test. Part F reading has 5 levels of reading tasks. Entrance point is based on the student's performance on Part C. Mark the student's starting point in Part F under the Started Here column. If high, start with F4, reading short phrases. If mid, start with F3, reading words. If low, start with F1, pre-literacy tasks. Scoring Part F is the same as scoring Part C. Both F1 and C1 require you move on regardless of the number of correct answers. Be sure you end the test with something a student can do so that the student leaves with a positive feeling about the experience. In listening parts, if the student clearly does not understand the listening task, you may repeat the model. If the student still doesn't understand, continue modeling with the other items, but score them as incorrect. In speaking parts, if the student says, "I don't know," you may assist him or her, but mark the answer approaches. In writing parts, if the student cannot write sentences, prompt him or her to write single words or letters. In reading parts, if the student can't read words or sentences, encourage him or her to identify a sound or a picture he or she recognizes. Test administrators must complete the training course for the Kindergarten Access. You can complete that course at weta.wisc.edu. Under the Preparing tab, view Kindergarten Test Administration training video and complete the remaining tabs, Testing, Afterward, Domains, and the quiz. Read the kindergarten section of the Testing Administrator's Manual, pages 17 through 33, and low, mid, and high writing samples, pages 26 through 31. You can practice giving the test to a colleague before giving the test to a student. Please contact myself with any questions you may have. Technology questions can go to Megan Brown. We thank you for joining us for this training. Please do feel free to go back into your WETA account and review anything that you may need refreshing on. Thank you again.